Welcome everyone. In this video, we're going to look at the service graph in the Calico user interface, and we're going to look at it at a very high level so that you understand what the service graph offers. All right. So in the user interface, if you look at the menu options, you can navigate to the service graph and click on the default view. Okay, let me minimize the options. And as you do so, you are presented with a topographical view of network activity in your cluster. All right. And in this case, I'm looking at a particular cluster here. You can click on the drop down to navigate to other clusters as well. All right. So let me go back to my cluster. Now, as you look at this, to start off with, in the default view, the flows are represented at a namespace level. So as I zoom in on the icons here, these are namespaces. You can double click on these icons to navigate to the namespace, which would then provide network activity at a workload level. All right. Let me navigate back to my global view. Now on the left here we have a pane, and if you expand on that, we have several drop downs, and the first one is namespaces. If you click on the namespaces drop down, you are presented with all the namespaces for this cluster. All right. Now you can type on this. For example, let's say I'm interested in a namespace called hipster shop. You can type on a few keywords, and then you're presented with namespaces matching that keyword, and you can click on the namespaces here, and the relevant namespaces are going to be highlighted in the service graph. And you can also right click on the namespaces here and expand a namespace. You will then be presented with a topographical view of network activity inside that namespace, as in you are able to now see network activity at a workload level. Right? Okay, so let me go back to my default view and remove this filter. Okay, so further down we have a drop down called network sets. Now network sets are a way of grouping external IP addresses or FQDNs and then referencing those in security policies. Now as you do so, traffic to and from those network sets are also represented in the service graph. So if I look at my list of network sets here, I have one called Tigera, which is basically a network set to the tigera.io FQDN. And as my workloads send traffic to that FQDN, that is also presented in the service graph. Okay. All right. So moving forward, further down, we have what we call views. Now, views are a way of grouping certain namespaces and creating custom views. So as you navigate to the service graph, the default view presents a global view of all the namespaces and network activity between those namespaces. Now, you can also select certain namespaces and create custom views. And when you do so, those views are visible in the main menu, and you can navigate to those respective namespaces using the custom views. So for example, I have a view here for the hipster shop namespace. So instead of navigating to the global view and then locating the hipster shop namespace and double clicking on the namespace to navigate to the namespace, you can directly navigate to the namespace using a custom view, right? Okay, so next up, let's have a look at the pane in the center bottom. Let me go back to my global view, all right? So if you look at this pane in the center bottom, we have the flow logs for all the flows in the cluster right now. You can select specific namespaces and retrieve flows for either specific namespaces or specific workloads, okay? And you can click on the flows to look at the details of each flow log. Now in this video, we're not going to go through all the details of the flow logs, but you can look at the flow logs in this menu for either namespaces or even specific workloads by selecting the respective workloads. Okay. All right, so next up we have DNS logs. Again, similar to flow logs, Calico out of the box logs all DNS requests and responses, and the relevant DNS logs can be seen in the DNS logs menu over here. You can click on individual DNS logs to look at the details of each log, similar to flow logs. All right. And next we have HTTP logs. We also call this application layer logs. Flow logs and DNS logs are out of the box. HTTP logs have to be configured, and Calico uses Envoy as a daemon set to provide HTTP logs. Again, they can be retrieved for namespaces or individual workloads, and in this case, we have the HTTP logs that record details such as the methods, the URL, the responses received, and the latency, or rather the duration for each transaction. Okay. So let me go back to my global view. We also see alerts. These alerts are triggered based on the alerting rules configured in your cluster, and it appears that for this cluster, I have an alert triggered for the app2 namespace, and it appears to be receiving DNS serve fail errors as it tries to resolve the github.com domain as an example. Okay. Finally, we have capture jobs. Now, using the service graph, you can initiate packet captures for either entire namespaces or even individual workloads inside the namespace. And once those capture jobs have completed, the respective captures can be downloaded using this menu. All right. Next up, let's look at some of the icons on the right here. To start off, we have the time interval. By default, the service graph represents or shows logs for the past 15 minutes. You can click on the drop down here and expand this time interval. So let's say I want to see the logs or the graph rather based on logs for the past 15 hours. I can expand the window there and click on apply, and then I have a representation of the graph based on the past 15 hours. Okay. So as you kind of adjust this time interval, depending on the behavior of your class, it's possible that certain flows may appear during certain time intervals and may not appear during other time intervals. Okay, so if you want a broader window, you can select the time interval and go for a broader window, and thereby have all of the flows within that duration depicted in the service graph. Okay. All right, so that's the first one, the time interval, and then we have a few kind of navigational options here, so you can maximize the service graph, and thereby you have a clean canvas to work on. Okay, but let me bring my menus back. Obviously, zoom in, zoom out. You can also use the mouse to do so. If you click on the views here, we have a mini map, especially in large clusters. As you're navigating through the service graph, this mini map could be handy. As you look at this mini map, in the miniature version of the map, you could even navigate the graph through the miniature version of the map, and you have somewhat of a context of which area of the graph you are looking at any given point in time. Okay. And finally, we have some options to refresh the service graph. A refresh might be required if you're interested in obtaining, let's say, some of the more recent logs, right? You can refresh the service graph. And we also have an option here to reset any layouts or filters you might have applied. And thereby the graph kind of goes back to a default preset. Okay. All right, so those are the icons on the right hand side. Now we also have a pane on the right hand side here. Okay. So for example, if I click on, let's say, one of my namespaces, let's say I click on the Hipster Shop namespace here. This pane is going to give me, first off, a summary of all the inbound and outbound flows, from that namespace. Okay. You can click on a given flow to obtain further information, such as, the port for that flow. But over here, I have a summary for that namespace. Okay. Now, if I go inside the namespace, let's say I click on a workload, and now I have a summary of all the inbound and outbound flows, from that workload, even to other workloads inside the same namespace. Like for example, based on this, I can say that the front end workload has outbound flows to things like the product catalog, the ad service, card service, etc. Okay, and the inbound direction, it has flows from monitoring and public network, which seem to be getting denied, indicated by the red arrow here. And it has flows from the load generator, which are accepted, based on the green arrows here. So if I zoom out of this, in the graph, you also see these red lines. These are for flows that are being denied or were denied at a given point in time. Okay. Now there are some other information here as well, which I'm going to skip for this overview video. Next up, if you click on a given flow, like for example, if I were to click on, let's say, a flow from, so if I'm to go to the monitoring namespace here, I click on a flow from, let's say, monitoring to book info. That's then going to give me information on the right-hand side regarding the policies that were evaluated as part of either allowing or denying that flow. Okay. And based on the policy decisions over here, we see that this flow was denied at the destination, okay, allowed at the source, but denied at the destination. And I can see that it was denied by a tenant to restrict policy. And I can click on this policy to navigate to the policy as well. All right. So that's it for this overview video on the service graph. Now there are certain insights here that we didn't go through in this video. For example, things like HTTP request duration, things like top level DNS statistics, right? So make sure to look at our documentation or videos regarding these insights as well, and additional use case and tips on how to leverage a service graph in your Kubernetes environments. So I hope you enjoyed this overview video. Thanks for watching.